Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. It is your host, Frank, and today we have another guest. This guest I've met through John Wilson Case competition. As you've seen, a lot of the people that I'm interviewing, I have met at the John Wilson Case competition, but I just wanted to introduce my new guest. So this is Emmanuel. Emmanuel, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us where you're from, what you're about, where you're looking to go in life.
Thank you, first of all, Frank, for inviting me. I was expecting this podcast to happen finally. And so, yes, my name is Emmanuel. I met Frank through Jeux du Commerce at John Wilson. We kind of bonded together.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a choice. We were social partners, basically. So the way is that there's the academic portion and there's the social portion. So the crazy people out there who get dancing with like no pants on, that's us. So we kind of had no choice to bond because there was alcohol in there. We just had a good old time. So basically, you just want to tell them above that, like how did we click? Why did we click?
So exactly, we were the social team. We were the ones that liked to talk, to meet a lot of people. So I think those kind of like the common things we had together. And through Jeux du Commerce, we were able to create like a closer kind of friendship, I can now say, that has been working. And many things that relate us or make us work together is the fact that we both like, I think, public speaking, right? One of the subjects that goes together. Mm-hmm. I was born here in Montreal. My dad is from Mexico. My mom is from France.
Okay, that's an interesting mix.
Yeah, it's like like I always say, a smoothie. It's a
smoothie.
France, yeah. It's like banana chocolate.
You always have a way of putting things that I find very funny.
It has to be like food. It has to be like food. It has to work together. And exactly, I was born in Montreal. I had the opportunity, I think, to have as we see here now, an education, proper education. We see many countries right now in which people don't even have access to education. So I feel pretty lucky, pretty blessed to have
Definitely.
this.
Underappreciated for sure.
Yeah, right? It's pretty cool. And through time, I've been able to discover that I was someone, first of all, I was really shy.
You were?
Yes,
okay.
I was really shy.
So everybody listening to this, Emmanuel is the last person that is shy. So it's proof that it's very easy to do a 180, but it's mostly the time frame I think that people have to stick to, that like kind of they fall off the bandwagon because they're like, oh, I can be a different person for let's say 2 minutes, but then I lose my energy and I lose my drive and I peter out because that's not me, and that's what I hear a lot. So yeah, anyway.
But it is true. It is true. You realize that some people sometimes actually want to change. They want to do something different, but then they're kind of scared or don't believe that the change is possible.
Definitely.
Right? So that was kind of my situation. I was actually really shy. I was scared to talk to people. I realized one of my biggest realizations was in CEGEP. For those who are in Quebec, we all go through that little phase. Most of us actually. And in CEGEP is when I realized that I actually had a little problem, I would say, or like a pretty much huge problem. I had a lot of anxiety. If for those of you who know what anxiety is actually it can be pretty intense actually, especially when it's something like social anxiety. And the first time I actually realized it was in class. It was when my teacher told us to read a book. I still remember that day actually. And once I got to class, I actually read the book, funny thing. And she went over some questions. And since nobody was answering the question, she just picked someone like randomly. And that was me. And that was me.
Obviously, it has to be you.
And I remember that exact moment in which I was looking at the teacher, becoming all red, and having nothing to say but to just stare at the teacher and like freak out, right?
Yeah.
Internally, I was freaking out.
No, absolutely. It's a terrifying experience to have. And it happened exactly to me, the same thing. Because it's like, we put so much expectations on what it is to actually perform and to actually talk and to actually be yourself. And to a certain extent, it's important to be yourself and not to be that person who is just like always like has to push always and always and always. Those types of people are fine, but like in the wide majority of things, you need to be a balanced individual. That person that pushes those exterior motives, but you need to be able to express yourself. And I think that's very important because people that don't express themselves end up, pushing it even more back and going even more into that shyness, I find.
That is true. That is absolutely true. And it wasn't the kind of realizations I did when I realized that I was not even able to express myself, And that experience actually learned me something, which was I have two options at this point. It's either I stay the rest of my life being scared of talking in front of people, like living kind of internally and not being able to express myself out, or I work on myself.
Absolutely. That's great. It's great that you had that realization so early as well.
Don't you think some people sometimes it's hard and they actually realize like long
very
yeah, exactly.
Very late. So yeah, you have that choice and you can decide to make it or not. And that's the proof that you can totally just decide your faith. And I find that a lot of times anxiety, well, not a lot of times, all the times, anxiety is given on you by yourself. You are the person that's exposing yourself to all this stress. It's self-driven. There is actually no external stress when you think about it, because you have all these expectations to what you should do and what you should be able to do. And, you know, I've fallen down so many times I can't even count, like, you know.
Yes.
But it's that falling down that changes you as a person, and that makes you somebody who's eloquent, that's able to speak, that's able to not be a shy person and be themselves most above all, I find.
You said a point I think is really interesting, which is kind of like the mental aspect of things such as anxiety, right? Like it's you pressuring yourself. It's really all in your head, but the emotions that creates are actually horrible.
Very strong.
They're really strong. And funny thing is that I first I thought that was all bad. I was like having anxiety. It's horrible. Those experiences, I would not like to live them again. But then I realized, as you were saying, that those experiences allow you to learn from it, right? And after to be able to make that change, if you wanna change as a person,
yeah.
right? So I think now I'm happy that all this passed, because I learned from it. And now I can actually progress and go towards a different direction, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the points I think that just you and I, we linked or we bond together when we first met, is because we were both crazy. We met each other, I don't know, Frank, if you remember, when we met each other, we were both crazy.
Yeah, I think I remember. It was, wasn't it like we had this challenge where, okay, it was the theme was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and we had to dress up. We had to dress up in obviously Fresh Prince of Bel-Air attire, and I went the day before. I went to like Village des Valeurs, which is like a thrift store, just bought a bunch of wacky stuff, and just showed up with like a back cap and like shorts super high, and basically it was like a treasure hunt, and we just ran everywhere like crazy. We were like sprinting. We really wanted to do this. We were like pitching off each other, like throwing energy at each other. It was great.
That is true. Now that I remember, our performance as well. So for those who don't know, actually, we performed together at the competitions, and I think we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It's very, definitely a learning experience in of itself, because it puts you in a situation that you've never been in, which I think is very important. But to come back to the task at hand, so we were talking about public speaking. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your own experiences? So after you went through this phase of deciding and being upfront with yourself and understanding that, okay, I am going to move forward, like how did you physically work with your anxiety? Like, because you're at a point where you're very highly anxious, and you can't immediately not be anxious. It's not like it's a transition. It takes some time, and you're still anxious to this day, obviously, because everybody has anxiety. But do you want to just tell us a bit about that?
Super question. So exactly, there's at this point in which you realize that something is not working, or you should work on yourself, and the next thing is really to work on it, right? It's all the journey you're gonna have till you find what you really want out of it. And so when I realized all of this, I told myself, I created a plan about what I was going to do in order for it to change. First of all, I decided to start reading books. That would help me, right? We often say how read books are actually really amazing. They do change, I think, someone's life if you really use them properly, and if you apply all the things or some of the things you think are coherent in the book. So I'll give you an example. I started reading things like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you know about that book.
I've read it too.
Amazing book. For those who actually struggle with anxiety, I really recommend that book. It's amazing. I've read things such as How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I was someone that I told you I was shy. So I was like, if someone...
These may sound like very corny titles, but they're actually very strong books.
Great books.
And you have to give them a chance before. Yeah. And I do think that some of the Eckhart Tolle story is a little bit pushed. Like the fact that he said that he was so enamored by finding the power of now that he was like, you know, this bum for 6 months and he lived in the street willingly. And it's just like... You have to put a limit to it, but a lot of what's applicable in that book is life transforming. Absolutely,
totally. You're right. Again, you take what you think is good from the book. The rest, sometimes it's of course sometimes a little bit of exaggeration. But things such as How to Win Friends and Influence People, On the Art of Public Speaking, I started really getting a grasp of all this amazing information and started applying to my life. Right? There's something I always tell people: if you want to read, that's amazing. But if you don't apply the things that you think are important, then you're actually not really making that much of a change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started reading these books. I signed up for Toastmasters. For those who don't know, Toastmasters is a public speaking club that allows you to have that exposure that you need, that allow you to practice.
I think they're based worldwide, actually.
They are worldwide.
It's not only Canada, there's some in the US and some elsewhere, I don't know, in Europe.
I think there are more than 40 countries.
Okay, that's crazy.
Is huge. The biggest public speaking club ever. So I hear sometimes in the meetings, for example, we have guests coming, and they're like, I was in Toastmasters in Australia, or I was in Thailand, and I was in a public speaking club. Like, they're really like around the world. So that's a great thing. It shows that in every single country, there's people that really want to make a difference in terms of their public speaking skills. So I think that's actually very important.
Yeah, I find it very interesting because essentially the gift of speech is one of the biggest gifts we have, because it also gave us the gift of abstraction, right? Because if we have the ability to talk to other people, we also have the ability to relate to other experiences that other people have and talk about abstract things. It's one of those things that made us evolve so much as humans, because it's like you communicate ideas instead of communicating, physical things that you can see, touch, feel. It's more like it's an esoteric experience when you're exposed to those things where you're actually pushed to think further and to think through someone else's lens. I think is very, very deep and very, very important in society.
Absolutely. Of course. I think it does make a huge difference. It does the importance of being able to speak public. We were actually talking about this a little bit earlier, you and I together, about how we believe that public speaking should be a skill that everyone should work on. Right?
Absolutely.
How many situations in life have we found oneself in which we have to either talk to a lot of people or to get rid of that kind of shyness so we can actually get out of the comfort zone, right?
Yeah, there's so many of them, and it really depends on if you expose yourself to those situations.
For sure.
And my goal as an individual is really to shape my mind to be able to expose it in front of people.
For sure.
And share what I learned through having interactions with you, right? Because the base of this podcast is, okay, so we have all these very interesting discussions between people, yet nothing is recorded and nothing is ever thought of after. Yet if I could have these conversations day after day with individual after individual and keep having those conversations with those same individuals through time, we can definitely see the difference of those individuals' thinking and my thinking in the process, because I'm influenced by the speaking of those people. So that's the whole aim of this podcast. So you talked, that's my gift to the world. What do you want to bring to the world? Like why did you want to start a club? Were you influenced by Toastmasters? Is there anything you wanted to bring to the world because you like public speaking so much and you thrive on it?
As you said, I think public speaking is super important for many reasons, and one of them again is sharing ideas. I think public speaking is one of the best ways in which you can impact a lot of people, right? And it's been a really efficient one when you're able to do it in a good way, in a way in which people are interested in what you're saying. Thus, the reason why I worked on my public speaking skills is because later on I do want to share ideas with the world. I do want to be able to inspire people, and for that I feel like I need to be able to become a good public speaker. And that's the reason why I actually entered this journey. But overall, later on, I want to become someone that can impact in a positive way people. And that is one of the reasons why we started, I think, this. And this is what I want to bring to the podcast as well. I want to encourage people to realize that they can change the world.
And I think you started thinking about a club a little bit. You wanted to start a public speaking club. I don't know how you would have run it. Would it have been similar to Toastmasters, or?
It's actually curious you say that, because I had a question. It was a great question, actually, about someone telling me or asking me, are you competing with Toastmasters? Is it going to be something different? Is it going to be the same thing? My idea, which would be the CPSC, the Concordia Public Speaking Club, it's an idea that I created in which I want to open a club to help people really practice their public speaking skills, to get that exposure. And it wouldn't be the same thing as Toastmasters.
Okay, I'm not sure everybody's familiar with the structure Toastmaster uses, but do you want to explain that a bit, maybe flesh it out, and let us know after what you would change and why you would change it?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, I explained a little bit what Toastmaster was. But Toastmaster pretty much allows you to practice different speeches or different texts, different things you want to share, and practice every single aspect in different speeches. I'll give you an example. So for example, you might do a speech called speech number 1, in which this speech is going to be all about organization or organizing your speech, right? So in this case, you'll be working in that aspect, but maybe next speech you might talk about something such as using visual aids or vocal variety or body language, right?
So
focus on
an element of public speaking.
Exactly. An
Okay.
element of public speaking, which allows you at the end to become a better public speaker.
Okay.
And that's really the philosophy of Toastmasters,
Yeah.
is to be able to present multiple times and to practice on what particular.
They're very structured because they're so big that they need something that they can use, wash, repeat. You know, they need something that it's kind of like franchises who are huge that need to reproduce the same element that's successful with the public. Same thing with Toastmasters. How would you like modify it a bit? Do you think you can add a little bit more spice to it, or?
The thing is, Toastmasters is for everyone. And I want my club, of course, to be for everyone, but I want to aim it particularly at students. Because I feel like a lot of students are really not doing or not having enough exposure. And not a lot of them are actually going to clubs such as Toastmasters. I want it to be a club that can reach out to this particular target or this audience in general. I want students to realize how important it is so they can actually come there and practice. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the structure, I do think it's going to be different. First of all, I'm not going to be asking for money. Okay?
They ask for money?
Oh. So Toastmasters is a club, so you have to put money. It's not a lot, actually. And my club would not be a way of competing again with Toastmasters. It's going to be something different.
If it was a club here, you would probably get endorsement from the school.
From the school. So it might maybe make part of a little bit of the tuition, but that people that have to pay already for their classes, right? So they can actually attend this class. And my whole philosophy out of it is I want everybody to participate and everybody to be able to give feedback overall, right? Because I think that's the best way to learn. It's when everybody can actually go, expose themselves, and have people critique and give positive feedback. That would be my number one thing. Of course, there's going to be more structured. I'm still working on the structure of the course. But that would be my main goal. My main goal would be something in which everybody can share and everybody can work together to improve the public speaking skills. And I'm still in the process. If it works, it should take approximately 6 months.
Okay.
We'll still see. We'll still need to see for the funding, but it would look like something like that.
Okay. So
I better see you at my public speaking club, Frank.
I mean, if it's here in 6 months, I'll definitely be here. So I'll come see what it's about. Maybe get taught a thing or two because I still have a lot of progress to make. So anyway, so now we've talked about our experiences, where we came from. Actually, you talked a lot about where you came from, but I didn't really share where I came from. So I'm going to do that. This is kind of not in the order I wanted to do it, but I'll do it. I'll stay very brief. So I was very shy when I was young. I was overweight. And, after that, I lost a bunch of weight. After my doctor told me I was obese, I lost a bunch of weight, started training, gained back all the weight because I love donuts and beer and food. But it's okay. It's okay. And like, it automatically changed with that, but it also changed in terms of public speaking. It changed very recently because it was always an outward thing for me. It was always like physical of what I can do to feel better in other people's eyes, but never what I can do to be better with myself and to understand myself more and to express myself better and overall to have better ideas and to be more, just eloquent when I speak and just happier overall with my speech. And so that journey started about 2 years ago when I started reading very heavily, started looking at public intellectuals, which I love, and I got really into it. And I realized that after a speech I had read or listened to of one psychologist that I'm particularly fond of, he talked about the goal of university and that it was kind of lost nowadays, and that academia as a whole is usually like you study, you get your little piece of paper and you get out, right? You try to do that as fast as possible. But he talks a lot about the actualization of your way of propagating ideas. So you're a specialist in your domain after your bachelor's, after your master's, after your PhD. If you cannot communicate to the layperson meaning like anybody, if you can't communicate complicated ideas and boil them down to very simple ones and share those simple ideas, people are never going to be able to communicate in large strats of population. So that's what I want to do, is take very large and complicated ideas, use speech to boil them down, and expose them to the public to be able to reach the maximum number of people. For example, through this podcast. So that's why. That's a little bit of a background.
That is super interesting.
Thanks, man.
But just out of curiosity, what got you into philosophy? What got you into...
Yeah, that's a good question. So I thought a lot about this, but it really started after my first psychedelic experience. And like...
A lot of things start after psychedelic experience.
I did psilocybin mushrooms, which is magic mushrooms, for the first time.
Okay.
I had 3.5 grams, and it was very, very life transforming. There's a lot of studies, in fact, that show that when you do hallucinogenic drugs, it opens up your openness to experience, which is one of the 5 traits of psychology, and it opens it up by 1 standard deviation on average. So that's about 15-20%. On average, so that's a lot of openness to a new experience. And I got into training my brain, and I was a psychology major at first, so I started thinking about all those things. How do I arrange my psyche to be most performant? And philosophy in particular, it came in because I realized that there's 3 big pillars to life. There's life, that you're born, that you're gonna die, and there's the way you live your life. So philosophers, they bar off the big ideas that they have, and if that's not the most efficient way to live your life, you go about something else. But it's kind of like they try new ideas, and if those ideas don't work, they go to something else. But you learn a little bit from Aristotle, you learn a little bit from Marx, you learn a little bit from a little bit from every individual, and it's kind of like at public speaking, where you're all talking and you all have a good answer to this question. You're kind of going to make a big answer that encompasses all the smaller answers. So that's why I love philosophy. And also, I just find that thinking about the mind is fascinating because it's so huge.
Seeing the world, the same world with different perspectives is something that you're able to do, I feel like, with kind of ease, right? I think we had a couple of conversations when we met in which you were able to analyze or to bring a different point to something we were both seeing or thinking about. And that's the interesting part, I think.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Of philosophy.
In general, absolutely. But because it's very large thinkers that think about very difficult ideas, and that's what I like about it, is that it's not dueling with very small ideas. It's taking very big ideas and taking a slash at it, because nobody is, right? Anyway, so we're gonna move back because I could go for hours on this subject.
We go for hours.
For sure.
Subject.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to bring public speaking to the world through my podcast. You wanted to bring it through this project. Are there any other projects that you would like to do that you would feel public speaking is useful? I know I see you have a bottle here. That's the Concordia Real Estate Society Club. Shout out to them. Yeah. I'm not really into real estate, but I know that you want to be, and I know that probably this is a good place to start for you to get towards those goals, or even do good in the world in general, because we live in a very extroverted world where being very extroverted is very rewarding. Society is going to reward you a lot more now for being extroverted than it did in the 1950s, right? It's very true.
Great reference. I wanted to say, by the way, that I think there's so many amazing things, and we can actually equal all the pros and cons about being introverted and extroverted. However, you are right. It is still, I think, today, seen someone who's extroverted, someone who seems sometimes more confident, or someone who's not necessarily scared to talk and say what they think, right? But again, I think they both have all equal pros. It's just like they have equal cons. So someone can be introverted but have so many amazing things to say. You just have to be able to let them talk, or to listen to what they have to say, which is sometimes
increasingly rare.
But also often because people that are extroverted, such as myself, have to realize that it's about also digging and getting to know really every single person.
I mean, would you really call yourself extroverted now? Would you really say that you're extroverted now, or would you say that you changed because it raises an important point, because it says you're not, in my opinion, you're not an extrovert. You're not an introverted person anymore, because every single time I've seen you reach me as extroverted. But maybe you think that if you didn't have if you didn't have that push, that drive to be extroverted, maybe you would come back and remain introverted. Like, what do you think? Do you think it's like...
So again, I think, of course, it depends on the situation, right? Like the moment can depend so much. You and I are now, we know each other, we're ourselves with each other. But let's say I go somewhere which I know literally nobody, okay? It's a complete different situation. I am going to stay myself because I'm someone who's extroverted. I like talking to people. I love talking to people. But maybe not as much as a moment in which, or a background in which I am with people that I already know, right? So it's often a question of situations. Of course, I am more extroverted normally, but I do have my introverted side that can often sometimes come up. And it's not because at that moment that I'm necessarily being more introverted, I don't have things to share with people, things that we can all talk together. And it's sometimes, I think this aspect is sometimes we don't really see it, right, about introverted people. We kind of have an idea about, oh, this person is shy, and so it's maybe not necessarily confident or doesn't necessarily have something to share. And I think that's where we should open up a little bit and realize that being introverted has as many positive aspects as being extroverted, depending on the situation. But overall, what my mission is through public speaking. I think it allows me to have in general certain confidence, and it allows me to meet the people I want to meet. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I'm not scared to go reach out to someone that I admire a lot and tell them, listen, I love what you're doing. I'm impressed by what you're doing. I want to learn from you. And that's something that a lot of people are actually scared.
You have done that, right? You do have mentors. Absolutely. So probably everybody that's listening to this knows what a mentor is, but basically a mentor is somebody that you view as being somebody who has reached where you want to be in certain aspects of society. It could be money, it could be influence, it could be wisdom. You choose, and it's really important to have these mentors because there are a lot of tricks of the trade that cannot be taught; they have to be shown.
Yeah, I do believe 100% in that, and I feel like everybody should have at least a mentor. I feel like everybody should at least try to follow. Maybe you don't know yet where you want to go, but by discovering, by looking for things that interest you, by looking forward to people that are actually having great success in what you like, I think it changes perspective. It does make a huge difference. And so since I started working on myself, then I reached out to mentors. I was like, hey, you are doing exactly or some of the things I want to do. What am I losing by learning from you, right? I feel like I'm losing more by not reaching out to that person. Mm-hmm. And I realize that a lot of people, especially in meetings, sometimes I go to meetings and I see people that are actually super influential, people that are doing amazing things. And they're being admired by a lot of people. But then only one or two people out of the whole crowd are going to go see that person and ask them questions. You have to realize and understand that these people are humans. Like, this influential person is a human just like you. And it is important, and it is actually beneficial for both of you if you can learn from each other. If you can learn, of course, learn more from that person, but going there and not being scared of it. So that's one of my philosophies. That's one of the things I think that are important, and I implement it. The reason why I do public speaking and why I enjoy it so much is because I can use it in my day-to-day life. I can actually be more confident in my actions. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it.
What actually changed my perspective a lot in terms of being outgoing versus being introverted, I think kind of just doing it and not asking too many questions, just throwing yourself out there, taking a leap of faith, I think is very, very, very intrinsically worthy because it pushes, that's your drive from inside that's telling you like, okay, I'm doing something which I'm not sure of. I'm exerting all the stress that I can on your body, yet you're going with it and you're going past where you should stop because your body's telling you don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So that's the ultimate cure to anxiety, is just like pushing through that experience and coming out stronger, because even a bad experience is a good experience if you get rid of anxiety, you know?
Of course.
And do you want to talk a little bit about your job? Obviously, I didn't really think about that, but it was like you were saying like, oh yeah, if there's nobody talking to him and you just need to go ask him questions. But it's like perfect because you do that like 20 hours a week, so you might want to talk about that a bit. a little bit of practice there.
That is a great question. So it was actually part of the change, the progress. And for those who don't know what a canvasser is what I've been for now approximately a year and a half. Now I'm kind of like a program manager, so I'm not necessarily doing this the whole time. Sometimes I still do it to motivate teams. But my role is pretty much, I'm sometimes at metros. And I am the annoying guy.
Metro Subway for the
Metro Subways, exactly. I am the annoying guy that's probably going to stop you and ask you to help organizations with your credit card on a monthly basis. So I am the one that's going to convince you to help out. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy about the action. I think it does make a huge difference. We've collected so much money so far. We've made such a big difference.
No, it is very, very important.
But the role itself might look funny, and often because it's not easy, people think...
It's stressful. And everybody is convinced that nobody has time. Because we live in the city, and it's it's not that big of a city, but we are 1 million plus. And so there's a lot of people buzzing around and minding their own business, and then they're just listening to their music or on their phone or talking or going to their work, and you stop them and you're like, "Hi, can I have 5 minutes?" And it's the most I feel that it's probably you've probably gotten the most
rejections,
rejections and harsh no's ever.
Per minute, I have the highest ratio. So the highest ratio of rejections per minute, I have it. I own the record. So everybody are safe. I've been to metros. One of them is, for those who don't know, Square Victoria is on the Orange Line here in Montreal. It's a station, metro station. When it's 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock approximately, and people finish the job, often in the corporate world, because that's what Square Victoria. The metro is like a river of people just wanting to go back home. So I found myself in the middle of that river, having at least hundreds of no's per minute. Hundreds of no's. So these people are just going by so fast.
That's
I'm
crazy.
Listen, can I talk to you? No. Can I? No. We're not answering, right? And those rejections have helped me through time to not doubt myself, or pretty much to go forward, just jumping whenever I have the opportunity of doing something, because I'm not scared if it's a no.
Right.
If it's a no, it's
just
a no.
Just throwing out, because you're throwing yourself out. And I feel that that's such a good thing for you to take that leap of faith and not really, but the thing is that we do that by extension in our life so often, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not just reflected in our interactions with other humans. It's reflected in business deals. It's reflected in public speeches. Yeah. It's reflected in every hard decision in your life that you're going to have to make that you wouldn't make if you were risk averse. If you weren't risk averse, sorry. So you would make it if you had that ability to make that jump, but you wouldn't do it if you only use your rationality and your emotions. But there's just something about throwing yourself out that always, most of the time, seems either to reward you with a lesson or reward you with what you wanted in the deal, or at least part of it.
Of course. I could talk for hours about all the things I've seen, all the experience I had.
Just do 5 minutes of solid, cringeworthy stuff.
There's a lot of cringeworthy stuff. There's a lot of things I've seen. Before being in the metros, I used to do door to door because I switched. And just a little quick story, something that got me into, that made me realize what I was into, was going into a pretty good neighborhood. It was a wealthy neighborhood, a beautiful neighborhood. I was so happy, actually. I was like, let's get some money. Let's get all the donations out there, right? And so I remember going to this house, which had a huge parking. I remember seeing, I think it was one Ferrari, I think it was one BMW or something.
Okay.
I was about to take some Snapchats, go to the cars.
Take fake pictures.
Here in my garage, just found this new Lamborghini.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
I was about to do that, but then I was like, let's first get the money. Let's first find the donation, and after we'll celebrate, right? And so when I'm about to go in front of the door, and I knock, and someone opens, and the guy is like, what are you doing here? So I present myself. I'm like, it's nice to meet you, sir. My name is Emmanuel. I represent this organization. He asked me again, what are you doing here? So I apologize. I'm like, sir, my name is Emmanuel. Let's start again. And for the third time, he asked me, what are you doing here? And so that's when I realized that it was kind of not an ongoing conversation. It was just a one-way conversation.
It's like a stop.
Right? It's like a stop.
It's like an immediate
and get
stop.
off my way. Exactly.
And
I was like, okay, sir, thank you very much for your time. And then he asked me, did you touch with your dirty finger my doorbell? He tells me it cost him, I think, 2Ks to put it there. And that's when I realized what kind of job I was into and
gosh.
how I was going to live the next couple of months. And so I left this place without taking any Snapchats, and it was kind of like an experience, allowing me to see what was going to come ahead. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not, again, about the money side. There are people with a lot of money that have given a lot of money, people with no money that have given a lot or no money whatsoever. I don't think they're necessarily related. It's just that I had so many experiences with both sides, and it's actually just hilarious.
No, that's very funny. That's very, very funny. And, like, it's not that surprising. So you get assholes everywhere. There's always going to be people that want to bring you down. And it's like, what I wanted to talk about is actually a law of large numbers.
Okay. And
so I wanted to talk about the fact that you got rejected so many times that essentially the law of large numbers is like, if you have the same problem with two outcomes, and one outcome is failure and one outcome is success, then if you have the failure outcome more and more and more, that just means that in the future you're going to have the success outcome more and more and more. Okay. So essentially, the more aggregate failures you have as a whole, the more chances you have of succeeding as a whole.
Absolutely. Something to teach me as well was the law of averages, which is really related to this, actually.
I think that's it.
Pretty much the same thing.
I think it's the same law.
The same thing, the same law. And they told me at first, listen, this is a roller coaster. That's what they told me. First time I saw my boss, he was like, listen, this is a roller coaster. If you 10 people, like you try to stop 10 people, for example, in the streets, you might stop maybe 2, right? Out of the 2, maybe 1 is going to listen. And out of that 1 person, probably nobody's going to back with you. Nobody's going to sign up.
No.
Or maybe 1,
but
right?
Take 100.
Exactly. And I was like, take 100. Now, if you start applying those rules, you'll see it's completely different, because if I do 100, maybe that 1 person out of 100 is going to say yes, but that yes is so rewarding. It is so rewarding that it encourages me to go stop another 100 people, right? And that's what actually it learned me that lesson.
That's awesome. That's a great lesson to learn.
And so now that's why I don't take a no for an answer. And I'm not saying that you have to be pushy with people. I always respect people and their decisions.
Absolutely. So, I think there's always like a little bit of leeway.
Yes. So I work with that, for example, because I'm able now to recognize more what's a real no to a talk to.
You mean physically recognize for the person? A lot of the times, if the person's really not in the mood, they're probably not going to look at you in the eyes. Their shoulders are turned.
You have verbal cues. Of course, you have verbal cues. And sometimes I'm able to see someone, for example, who's not interested in all about what I'm doing. And that's totally fine. They have the right not to be interested in what I'm talking about. And in that case, I'm going to let them go. I'm like, thank you for your time. You can go have a great day, right? But then I can do my speech, and someone can answer, for example, listen, I don't have a lot of time right now, and I have to do some things at home, but I'm actually curious about what you're talking about. Do you have a website or something? Or can you give me a pamphlet? And that's one of the signals to me that shows me that there's actually a genuine interest in what I'm saying, and that's when you can start working on how to convince someone, right? How to influence someone to actually go make that action. And that's something that I realized that is actually super important. And I've used it in different situations in my life.
You use it in every situation.
I'm moving right now into a new apartment, and I'm 21 years old only, and so my credibility is really low when it comes to like going to a new place. When owner looks at me, he's like, "You're 21 years old."
He's like, "I've been places. I was in my mom's, room at her house."
I know, exactly. And so the way they look at me, or the way he looked at me, was kind of like, "Okay, listen. First of all, you have to look at your credit thing, but you have nothing because you used to live with your parents." And so, after kind of like agreeing to let me go to find an apartment, the owner, I started negotiating the price with him, which is something he's never seen in his life. He told me, he's like, "What are you talking about? Like, I have demand for that apartment. I just accepted you with your like no credit. Plus, you're asking me to like negotiate on the price." But funny thing is that he actually did settle, and he actually did lower the price of the rent.
How much was it?
Now, it was $1,100 per month. he lowered $50 per month. It doesn't look like a lot. But
Well,
at the end of the
over
year,
a long term.
at the end of the year, it's $600 actually that I'm not going to be paying. And that could be used for something else, just electricity, for example. But then
Because that is very expensive in Quebec. Funny because we have all the rivers, yet we pay the most expensive in Canada. It doesn't really work.
A little bit weird. But that's what happens. And he was happy at the end. He told me he was happy I negotiated. Because he was like, most people are scared to ask and to negotiate. And he's a businessman. And so he was like, First, I didn't like it at all. First, he didn't like it at all. But at the end, he kind of appreciated it. He was like, that guy is ready to go forward, to ask the questions, not to be scared of getting a no. Because worst case scenario was a no. It was just like, listen, it's either this or a no. And I would have taken that, okay, that's fine.
If you can take a no, that's good. But if you can't take a no, that's bad.
Of course.
Because you need to be able to understand people's boundaries, but at the same time, there are many people that you can go much further than you think you can actually go. Because they will. It's funny because they won't say. I like when things are clear, and they won't say like no. They'll say like no in the most like indirect way humanly possible. And be very, very shy about it. And like I'm always. Like, if I don't get no, like, no. I usually, like, I'll either, ask in a different way or think about what they're thinking and then go about it another way,
Yeah.
And I think that it's very rewarding in general, too, because you can get a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't have any otherwise. And it's also being comfortable with uncomfort because, like, let's say I got this new position at the bank and I negotiated my salary for a decent amount more. And I talked to my friend who went to the salary negotiation seminar that we had here. And he told me, like, use silence to your advantage. A lot of people are very, very, very uncomfortable when it comes to silence, and especially after a categorical answer.
For sure.
So if you use those elements and you kind of bring them together while still remaining polite, obviously, you can get great at negotiating. And I think that's also something that comes hand in hand with public speaking, because if you have no bite behind your howl and you're not able to back up what you're bringing to the table, you're wishy-washy and you'll just fly around with the wind. You don't have anything you're laying down on, you have no base for your thinking and for your person. And so people are just going to push you aside in life, I find.
That is a great point. That is actually a great point. And that's why you're right. It does relate to public speaking at a certain point. With communication skills, a lot, of course. And with persuasion, I feel like something you applied right now when you told me about that story, and at the bank, for example, or in general when you're trying to negotiate people, is the fact that you really, really need to put yourself in the other person's shoes or understand their perspective. And that is such an easier way to negotiate or to be able to sell something. Because a lot of people that are selling, they're all into, I'm going to convince you because you need to think the way I think. And so I'm going to push it until you understand that. And if you realize this concept, you realize that most people are actually not necessarily going to buy from you because people want to be understood in life. People want to be understood. People want you to value what they think, right? So when I'm selling something, when I'm negotiating on something, I'm always understanding what's your perspective. We're trying at least to understand what's your point, right?
That's something I need to get much better at. And we had this talk, actually.
Yeah, we had a little bit of this talk, actually, before.
Yeah, because it's also, like, if you have problems with other people, you need to be able to flesh them out, to talk about them, and to keep your stance while understanding the other person's perspective. And it really helped me, the discussion that we had, because, nobody's perfect and friends are there to help each other. But anyways, so that was pretty much it for me, but we have a little bit more time, so we're going to talk about the current events and the impacts on the world for public speaking in general. So do you find there's kind of a limit to public speaking? Like, do you find like Donald Trump talking about grabbing women's pussy is kind of like the limit where it's kind of like so uncensored that it needs to be censored? Like, what's your opinion on the pros and the cons generally of public speaking? Do you think there's a limit to it? Or do you think that generally like everybody can say whatever they feel or they think is right?
That is such an interesting question because we are at a time in which there's a lot of controversies, right? A lot of things that are being talked about, we're kind of like going back to like what are our basic rights, what are we allowed to say, what are we not allowed to say, right? And I have different point of views when it comes to that subject. For example, you mentioned out Donald Trump, for example. I think public speaking, the public speaking, talking to people is really important. Transmitting a message is really important. However, you have to understand that if you're someone that has influence, if you're someone such as the President of the United States, then obviously what you say cannot be just like a lot of things that make literally no sense. You have to be coherent in what you say, because you're transmitting a message to a lot of people. Again, freedom of speech is super important to me. I think you being able to share what you think is one of the most important rights we have. But it's always important to take into consideration how are you going to impact your audience, right? And so if you're going to say a bunch of things that are, first of all, not true, like if you can check the facts.
Like demonstrably false. Yeah.
Exactly. If it's like common sense, it's just not right. Plus you are saying it to hurt a certain population, for example, I think you should limit yourself to say it. And I firmly believe in that, actually. Now the question becomes, should it be legal to say? Now that's another subject that's different.
Well, that's very different. I just wanted your opinion on this. It's a very small snippet. I don't want to make the discussion political. But overall, this was a great discussion, very well constructed. You know, we had a very easy time speaking to each other because we're teammates.
Yeah, for sure.
And we may be next year. Who knows? Anyway, so this was a very good podcast. I'm going to be posting this probably in the next couple of weeks. This is definitely going to be releasing with my week of podcasts, where I'm going to be posting one podcast every night from Monday to Sunday. So stay tuned for that. I hope y'all appreciated the podcast. I hope y'all appreciated me. I hope y'all appreciated Emmanuel. You want to shout out your club that may be there in 6 months, or
everybody is listening this podcast and is going to be going to Concordia, or wants to increase the public speaking skills, come to my club.
Yeah, come chat us up.
Kisses.
Yeah, come chat us up. Don't be afraid to tell us your opinion, how you found the discussion, what can be made better, what has been pretty good. Just let us know, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.